Welcome to BuildBytesDaily. For a long time, building a Next.js app felt like you had to make a tough choice. Do you want it to be blazing fast, but the data's kind of stale? Or do you want super fresh, real-time content, but your user is stuck staring at a loading spinner? Well, what if I told you that you don't have to choose anymore? Today, we're doing a deep dive into the game-changing world of Next.js cache components, which finally lets you have the best of both worlds. Okay, let's get into it. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with that core dilemma, speed versus freshness. Then we'll introduce this brilliant new solution from Next.js called Partial Prerendering. After that, we'll get our hands dirty with the two main tools you need to know, Suspense and Use Cache. We'll cover the one common mistake you're almost guaranteed to run into, and then we'll wrap it all up with why this is such a huge deal. All right, let's kick things off with the fundamental problem. As web developers, we are constantly juggling these two competing ideas. We want our sites to load instantly, but we also need the content to be up to the minute fresh. And honestly, for years, that's been a really tricky balancing act. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On one hand, you've got your static pages. They are unbelievably fast because everything's pre-built, but the downside is that content could be out of date the second after you hit deploy. Then on the other side, you have fully dynamic pages. The data is always fresh, but that comes at a cost, right? The user has to wait because the server is doing all this work for every single request. So the question has always been, can we do better? I mean, this is it, right? This is the holy grail we've all been chasing, the lightning speed of a static site, but with the power and freshness of a dynamic application. Well, get ready because that's exactly what Next.js is delivering with these new caching strategies. And that brings us to partial pre-rendering, or PPR for short. Now, this isn't just a small tweak. This is a totally new way of thinking about building for the web. This is the core tech that makes that best of both worlds dream a reality and finally gets us out of that old static versus dynamic argument. So, what exactly is PPR? The easiest way to picture it is this. You serve a static HTML page that has these dynamic holes punched into it. The page loads instantly with all the static stuff, your navigation, your layout, your footer, all that. Then, the dynamic parts, the stuff that needs fresh data, just streams in to fill those holes as soon as it's ready. No more waiting for the slowest part of your page to load before the user sees anything at all. So what does this actually feel like for a user? Honestly, it feels like magic. They hit your site and bam, the static shell is there instantly. It feels incredibly fast. And while they're looking at that, the dynamic pieces are just streaming in behind the scenes and seamlessly filling in the blanks. For the user, it's just this fluid, responsive experience from the very first moment. Okay, the theory is really cool, but how do we actually use this? Well, that brings us to our toolkit. And the first, and maybe most important tool you're going to reach for, is a core React feature that Next.js just leverages beautifully, Suspense. I like to think of Suspense as a bouncer at a club. It lets all the static, pre-rendered content come right in, no waiting. But for the dynamic VIP content that needs to be fetched on the fly, it puts up a little velvet rope. That's our fallback UI, like a loading skeleton. It says, hang on, I'm getting that for you. Then, as soon as that VIP data arrives, Suspense lifts the rope and lets it in to join the party. So when do you call this bouncer? Well, the first big use case is for any data that depends on the user's specific request. Things like reading cookies to show a logged-in state, checking headers, or using search params from the URL to filter results. Because this data is unique to this specific visit, it just has to be dynamic. The other major scenario is for any data that just changes often. Fetch requests to an API for live weather updates, or a database query for the latest comments on a blog post. By wrapping these components in a suspense boundary, you let them stream in without holding up the rest of the page from appearing instantly. All right, so Suspense is for streaming content that absolutely must be dynamic. But what about data that's dynamic but maybe doesn't need to be fetched on every single request? For that, we have our second tool, the Use Cache directive. Think of Use Cache as the flip side of Suspense. Instead of carving out a dynamic hole in your static page, Use Cache tells Next.js, hey, I know this looks like a dynamic data fetch, but I want you to run it once, cache the result, and just bake it into the static build. It's how you explicitly opt into caching for things that would otherwise be dynamic. And just check out how simple this is. Here we've got a function that's fetching a list of products from a database. Normally that's a dynamic operation, but with that one little line at the top, Use Cache, we're telling Next.js, run this at build time and bake the results right into the static page. It's so simple but incredibly powerful. Now, with any powerful new feature, there's always a few gotchas. And with this new model in Next.js, the most common one you're going to hit is forgetting to add a suspense boundary where you need one. But don't worry, Next.js is actually designed to help you catch this. So let's play this out. You've got a component. It's reading cookies, so it's dynamic. But you forget to wrap it in suspense. What happens? Does your app just get slow? Does it break without your knowing? Nope. This is the brilliant part. Next.js will actually throw a very clear error. It tells you exactly what you did wrong and why it's a problem. It explains that this mistake would force the entire page to become dynamic, which kills performance and defeats the whole point of PPR. So this error isn't a bug. It's a guardrail. It's a feature to protect you from accidentally shipping a bad user experience. And the fix just perfectly reinforces everything we just learned. You have two choices. Option 1, if the data truly needs to be fresh every time, you wrap it in suspense and let it stream in. Option 2, if the data can be cached, you move that logic into a function and you mark it with use cache. You're always making a conscious decision, stream it or cache it. Okay, so we've covered the problem, the new paradigm, and the tools you need to use it. Let's zoom out now and talk about the payoff. Why is this such a massive leap forward for developers and, more importantly, for our users? So what's the bottom line? Well, first off, you get instant loads. The static shell hits the browser immediately. Second, you get a way better user experience. No more of those jarring page-blocking renders. Third, you, the developer, get this amazing fine-grained control to decide component by component what's static and what's dynamic. And finally, yeah, the best of both worlds is actually here. So, as we wrap up here, I want to leave you with this question. Think about a project you're working on right now or one you're about to start. Where's that one slow data fetch that's holding back an entire page? Could you use Suspense to stream it in? Could you use PPR to totally transform that experience? The possibilities here are really exciting. And that's our deep dive into Next.js cache components and partial pre-rendering. If you found this breakdown helpful and you want more explainers on the tech that's shaping how we build for the web, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Build Bytes Daily. Thanks so much for watching and happy building.